understand how you got,
We're talking about this Jamboard right here.
wait, hold on, let me open up the.
Jamboard 1, which page was it?
No, Jamboard 2.
Oh, okay.
So the next one.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did you get 865 there? As the second part of that question.
Let's see. 865. I'm trying to remember what we did for this one. Oh,
Or how'd you get
865.
360? What'd you do to get 360?
So what I had to do is in this equation right here, the minimize, we wanted to minimize this equation.
Uh-huh.
So I found these intersection points, these 3 intersection points,
Yeah.
and really not all 3 of them were necessarily used.
Right.
That was the one thing where you have to be careful when you're graphing them like this. Not exactly. It's kind of hard to tell which ones are in the feasible region.
Yeah.
But I took the intersection points. Remember how I found those?
Mm-hmm.
And I plugged those XY into the XY for the cost equation. And then I found the minimum value. So they were 900.
You got 19 1/3.
Yeah, 19 1/3, 13 2/3. I got that from finding the intersection of the red and brown, the red and green line, that line and that line. So I solved that system of equations, multiplied.
How did you get 15x?
So I solved this system. I multiplied this green one by -1. Trying to see where I did that, if I did the work there, if I just did it in my head. I think I just did it in my head. I multiplied this by -1 and added it to this. So the y's are gone. This becomes 15. And when I subtract these, it becomes 360. And then I solved for x 24. And then I plugged it back into that green equation to find y, which was 9, and that gave me that right there.
All right, so on my
sorry, hold on a second. That's not correct. That should be the red and this one should have been the red and the green. So that point actually should have been this one right here.
Okay.
The red and the green was that point, and the blue and the green must have been this one, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because so to find that point, I had to multiply this by -3 to be able to eliminate the y, right?
Negative.
So when I multiply that by multiply this green equation by -3 will give you a -30y. So when I add these together, but then this would be a 15. Oh, maybe that's where I did it. Looks like they're both kind of like that. Yeah, so sorry. Hold on. I multiplied this by -3. Maybe that's how I'm trying to see where I did the work here. Negative. Do you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to find these 3 different intersection points. So the green, if I remember right, the green and the blue, it seemed to me like the green and the blue should have been here, but do you see how it's not? This says 24,9, but it's to the right of 25, so that didn't make sense to me.
Right.
So
that's I feel like on my midterm, like what's an easy way, instead of like writing out the graphs like homemade, like is there a way I could do it on my calculator?
Yes. So the way you can do it on your calculator is you set here. Let me duplicate this slide and show you how you would do that. That's what I was going to tell you last time. Is if you really want to be careful about this, what you would do is you would take these equations and you would just rewrite them all, solving them for y, so you can plug them into your calculator. So the red one would be y equals
-20x.
-20x plus 500 divided by 10. So it'd be -2x plus 50. That's the y. Okay, that's your y equation. The
Okay.
blue equation is y equals, I'm going to subtract 30 and divide by 30, right? Subtract 30x and divide by 30. So negative x divide by 30 would give you 11 plus 11. Is that right? What's 11 times 30? No, 33. What I'm doing, I'm just trying to do this in my head. It's 990 divided by 30. So those cancel and it's just 33. Yeah, 33. Get how I found that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the green one is going to be y equals, I'm subtracting 5x and dividing by 10. So negative 1/2 x plus 21.
How'd you get 1/2 again?
So I subtracted the 5. So think about there being a negative 5x, but then I'm dividing by 10. So negative 5/10 is negative 1/2.
Okay.
Okay. And now you take those three equations and plug them in. So that's a 50 right there. Now, if you plug those in to your y equals, so clear all these, clear, clear, clear. Oh, that should be equals, not.
Would you press graph?
Yeah, hit graph.
Okay.
X that out.
Or no.
All right. So the first one is negative 2x plus 50. The next one is negative x plus 33. And the last one is negative 1/2, so negative 0.5x plus 21. Make sure I plug those in right. And when you go to graph, and you can zoom, for you it's a little harder because you got to zoom them.
And I press graph.
And you can see, you can see where the y-intercepts are, tell you which graphs they are, right? So there's the y-intercept of 21, so that's the green one.
So how would I be able
That's
to
the y.
How do I pinpoint like you are? How do I zoom?
So what you have to do on your graphing calculator is you have to click on find, let's see, what is it? Graph. Yeah, you have to go to calculate. See the calculate. Oh. On this, it's a little bit different, but there's a calc button, I think, graph, and then there's an option to like read to me what your graphing calculator says near the graph button.
Trace, zoom, window,
Calc.
and y equals.
Isn't there a calc button? CALC.
There's mode, delete, stat, x.
What kind of graphing calculator do you have again?
TI-84 plus.
TI-84 plus interface. Let's see what it looks like.
It's that first one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the images so I can see it a little bit bigger. So you have, you're going to go to calc. You see above trace? You see the blue above trace?
Calc.
Second trace will give you calc. And then one of the options is going to be intercept, maybe. One of the options is going to be intersection. Intersect is going to help you find those other points.
Okay.
Sorry, where's mine at? The intersect is going to help you find those points that intersect, but the intercept is where it crosses the x-axis, if you wanted to find that, or the y-axis.
Wait, I have value 0, minimum, maximum, intersect, dy, dx, and f of x, dx. I don't know what that is. So should I press intersect?
Yeah, well, the intersect is going to give you these points right here.
Isn't that what
that's the intersect? Yeah, that is what you're trying to find, but I thought you were trying to find out which ones were. If you were trying to find those, the intercepts, the y-intercept, that's a little different, but you don't really need to find that. You want to find the intersection points. You can see that bottom line. See how it's got the 21? So that bottom line is my green line. You understand how I know that?
Yeah.
Because the y-intercept is 21. This is the blue line because the y-intercept is 33, and this is the red line because the y-intercept is 50.
So how do I zoom in again?
So red, there's a zoom button on there.
Zoom.
You go to zoom and then fit. I think it's zoom and then 0. I think if you do zoom and then 0, it'll fit it. It'll try to fit it in that graph a little bit better.
Zoom and then 0.
Zoom, I believe it's 0. If you arrow down, you can see. I think it's zoom 0, zoom fit, but maybe I'm wrong. You can zoom in also if you want. Maybe arrow to the right a little bit. It's a little trickier with those calculators because you have to do some. It's like kind of like old. It's kind of like old
Right.
old school.
Zoom, but it's not working.
Hit zoom. When you hit zoom, what options does it give you?
Z box, zoom in, zoom out, Z decimal, Z square, and yeah.
Is Z fit?
Zoom
if you
fit.
arrow down, Z fit is the one you want, I think, probably.
Oh yeah, sure enough.
Was that 0?
It's still hard to like pinpoint exactly where this is though.
So now that you've hit zoom fit, now zoom in. Now hit zoom again and zoom in and hit enter, and it zooms in on the screen that's on. Can you see the intersection points of these three?
Not yet. I'm not that close.
To be honest, you don't even have to find them yet, because when you go to second trace, which is calculate, and then you go to intersect, you can just pick the two lines and it'll still show you the intersection point, even though you can't see it right now on there, because they're going to intersect at one point. So let's go to second trace.
Yeah.
And then it's going to ask you and then go to intersect. You see that?
Yeah.
And then it's going to prompt you for a curve. It says curve question mark. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm on
and
the second curve.
Okay, so hit enter. So you're on the second curve, which is the blue one.
Intersection, right? 17, 16. Oh yeah, I got it.
So that's the intersection for the red one and the blue one.
Okay. And then yeah, I could see that. And then the next one. Oh wait.
Yeah, so we actually were right. Our intersection points were right. They just look kind of they look kind of weird. Our graphs aren't drawn correctly on my piece of paper on the Jamboard. The red one should be a little bit steeper, because that red one is gonna, this red right here is gonna actually cross just like here. It's closer to, it's kind of closer.
Yeah.
But do you see that the intersection points?
Yeah.
Those are correct. 24,9 was the correct intersection point, right? And since they were they all greater than symbols? Yeah, they all are greater than symbols. So they're all shading upward. So the feasible region is what we had discussed before. The feasible region is this region here.
Yeah.
So I feel like that point shouldn't be one of the options for the answer, but was it the answer? I feel like the answer should either be, it should be whatever, when we plug in 24,9, when we plug that one in, or 17,16, one of those two should give us the right. Oh, wasn't it 795? Wasn't that the answer?
Yeah, I believe so.
So 795 is that point. Yeah, so we did it right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, right. Yeah, whatever the outcome when you plug it in. Okay, yeah, no.
But this one we shouldn't even have had to plug in, because you can see on the graph. Again, look at my graph. If I zoom in, that point right there, that intersection point, which is the red and the green, is not in the feasible region. This intersection point is, and that intersection point is, and these two, that one there and the green one here, those are the 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 points we should plug in and find the minimum of those 4.
Right. Okay. So I'm good with those. Yeah, I'm good with that one right now. But
okay.
It's 6.1 and 6.2. We didn't really have much time to look over this one, but
okay. Yeah.
It's all like I think we did the first 7 together, but it's all
so you want to throw some on the Jamboard here?
Yeah, it's the yeah, I will. Oh no, where to go? Let me screenshot it one more time.
Are you on page 4?
Yeah. I'm about to post it in there. 1 second. All right, well, it didn't post yet.
Is it on yours? It might just take a second to show up on mine.
This one, all right, when I drag it in on this time, it's going to work.
Way to be positive, Nick.
All right, there we go.
There you go. All right, so this says, I'll take it from here. You don't have to touch it.
Yeah. I'll let you do that.
Solve the linear programming problem using the simplex method. Is the simplex method where we're using the slack variables?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you remember doing this? We're gonna need a slack 1.
Yeah.
We're gonna need a slack 2, slack 3, right? Slack 1, slack 2, and slack 3, right? So our equations are, so our system is like this. It goes 2, 1, 1, 0, 0, 60. Remember doing this? And then 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 42.
Wait, hold on. Can you slow down for 1 second? Because I'm trying to write it down.
Okay. Well, remember, this is all just on here. This is all, you can see it on this Jamboard. So let me explain it to you. You don't have to write it, just listen. Yeah. I'm recording it too. So it's on, this is on YouTube. And then 1, 2, what would be the next numbers?
1, next to 0,
0,
1, 72.
Perfect. You got it. Right. And so really it was like that, I think, with that, it was a augmented matrix. Right. Yeah. And then when we solve this, it's going to give us. So now what we're going to do, if I remember correctly, is we're going to take this equation, we're going to stick it into our matrix, and we're going to make we're going to edit a, whoops, I need to do that. Second matrix, edit, and we're going to make it a row 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 by 6. Remember that 3 by 6 matrix, and then enter those things in 2, 1, 1, 0, 0, 60.
Wait, what was the matrix? It was a 6 by 2.
I might have mixed one. Yeah, it's a 3 by 6.
3 by 6.
3 row by 6 column. So 2, 1. This should be a 1. Then a 0, 0, and then a 60. And then 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 42, and then 1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 72. Okay, and then if we go to, I believe, augment.
How do you get to augment?
Math, or was it no, R ref matrix, I believe.
How do you go there?
Let me see. I can't remember. Ref, yeah, you click, so clear, so you go back to the main screen, so quit out of everything.
All right.
Right? And then go to matrix, go to math, find ref, and then go back to matrix again.
Yeah.
And find matrix A, click on matrix A, and then hit enter. And it gives you the answer. So your answer is x1 plus 2s1. No. Plus 2s2 plus minus s3 equals 12. That's one of your equations. x2 x2 minus s2 plus s3 equals 30, and x2 minus 3s1. No, sorry. Oh no, there is no x. Hold on a second. No, I'm confused. No, that's x1, x2. So this is s1. S1 minus 3s2 plus s3 equals 6. I believe those are 3 equations. You follow how I got those?
So what
no,
it just
hold on. That's just setting it up. Now let's figure out what they're asking us. Solve the system. We're trying to maximize. So here's what we're trying to maximize. P equals 30x1 plus 40x2.
plus 2s2 minus s3 equals 20.
Shoot, I don't remember how you actually maximize it now. Maximum value of P is blank when x1 equals that and x2 equals that. Have we looked at this yet? How you actually find the maximum value?
Let me go onto the homework. I'm
gonna have to look at the explain thing to be able to figure out what you do here, because I don't think we ever did.
First part. We need to selecting the pivot element. Have we already done that?
So that might be what we haven't done yet. How do we select the pivot element?
It says locate the most negative indicator in the bottom row of the tableau to the left of the P column. The column containing this element is the pivot column.
Okay, I'm gonna have you share your screen so I can see what you're reading.
Yeah. So that make it easier.
So give me 1 second. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Go ahead and you share your screen now. The green button in the Zoom. Go to your Zoom window.
Do you see it?
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so it says Is this like the third? Is this after you've already done what we've done?
Yeah, so this was the first part, and we already did that.
Okay.
And then
Oh, so hold on. Oh, so they're putting. Okay, so look what they're doing. They're putting. Wait. Did they put another column in there?
a P column, it looks.
Oh, yeah. Look, they have a different matrix than us because they have a P column as well.
Yeah. So I kept it the same, and then
Here, scroll up a little bit. Let me see how they started it with it. Okay, so scroll down. So they added another column and another row. But then was there a way, I wonder if there's a way to solve it. Keep scrolling down. Let's see what they give us at the bottom. See if they give us like the reduced row echelon form. Keep going. They're doing this by hand. I don't.
we just did it by calculator.
Yeah, we did it by calculator. Let's see if the calculator would do it for us. Let's see if it gives us. Let's see if it goes to reduced row echelon form at the end. Keep going. I'm hoping it turns into the 100.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. It's looking like it's getting a little closer to that. Okay, go back. Oh dang! I think they did.
Yeah,
It looks
like
to me like it looks like they were getting there. It just wasn't in the. I'm just trying to see how they pull the answer out at the end. So go to that last page and if you can remember. See right there. Hold on. So right there. See how they've got the 10.
Yeah.
That actually is in reduced row echelon form.
It is.
It's just not written like row 1 should be row 3. That top row should be the third row instead of the first row, and then it will be in reduced row echelon form. So I think let's just see if it works. I think it's going to work. What I'm suggesting we do. So let me grab control back of the screen.
Yeah. Wait. Hold on. Let me get.
So let's edit. Let's start screen share. Yes. Okay. Let's change that slightly. Let's put another row in here. The last row is going to be, what was it? Why'd they make it -30? Didn't they make it -30 and -40?
Let me see.
And 0, 0, 0, and then they put another row in. So these would all have to be 0 here. And then what did they put?
What do they put where?
What did they put here? Did they put 1 here?
Wait, hold on. Let me see. Where at?
Go back and look at that last column. Was it a 1?
No, right there. The last column
So it was
3,000 or no, 2,340.
no, at the very beginning, what was it? At the very beginning of that process, what was that in that column?
0.
It was a 0 here?
Yeah.
And there was a 1 right before it?
Yeah.
Like that? Okay. So let's go back to our matrix. And let's edit that matrix. Now instead of a 3x6, it's a 4x7. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And then these are still pretty much the same, except this last one is going to be a 0 and then a 60. These are all the same. 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, and then one more 0, and then a 42. See what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
This is 1, 2, 0, 0, 1, now a 0, and then a 72. And that last column is where we put the -30, the -40, 0, 0, 0, then a 1,
And they do that
then
because
a
that's what they're
0.
solving for. Like that's the
Yes, because
P
that's the
equals.
P. This is like the P equation, right? The profit equation at the bottom.
Okay.
So they're calling the P. Basically, this is the profit column. They're making another variable called profit, and they're
Okay.
calling it. But so what they did is they took that equation, they subtracted negative 30x1 minus 40x2 plus the profit equals 0.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find out what the profit is going to be. Yeah, so I believe that that's what we have to do. And now if we quit this, whoops, second, quit, and we hit ref again for A, it's going to give us that.
That looks more like how they had it.
Right. So now how do we interpret that? Is 78 the answer?
Wait,
I think that's what they did.
78.
Or how did they S1? What did they do at the very end there?
Did you get a 1,000 number in there?
Tell me what they did at the very end to determine what the answer was.
So okay, so the first part of the question is, can the simplex method continue on this system? And it was no.
Okay.
So, and then
But then what did they say the answer was?
the optimal value of P, they said 2,340.
And it was the number sitting in this right column, right? It was the number sitting
all the way at the bottom.
Somewhere right at the bottom, like so ours would be 78 maybe.
Yeah.
But I feel like the bottom row wasn't. Show me again what that one was here. Let me stop the share your content again. Let me see again what it said. So because they're doing it by hand, right? We did it with the calculator
like 20 times long.
Let me make sure it's looking right. So right here, you see how it's got 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
See, we want the P to be 1.
That's our goal.
That's our goal. We want the P to be equal to 1.
Okay.
So we don't really have that yet. So we haven't quite gotten it yet. I'm just not sure how to do the simplex method with your calculator. It doesn't quite seem like it's reduced row echelon. It's pretty close to it. We could probably use reduced row echelon form, and then we could, let's see, what do they do? Multiply the pivot row from the second row. Scroll up just a little bit. Let me see what it says before that. Okay, stopping the simplex. It is not possible to select the pivot. If it is not possible to select the pivot column, the simplex method stops and the optimal solution has been found. The pivot column has been selected and it is not possible to select the pivot rows. So it has something, maybe you can't do it on your calculator. Maybe you have to do it manually.
So they do like 36 divided by 1.5.
Yeah, let me see if because what you're trying to do is turn that into a 1. That you want that second to last column to have a 1 in it somewhere, I think, is what you're really looking for. But yeah. I don't know how. Let me see if there's something called simplex method. Okay. Come, show me your screen one more time. Keep your screen up there. Let's just figure out what they've done, because I guess maybe we're gonna have to do this manually. So go all the way to the top of this explanation of the simplex method. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We know how to set up the matrix, and we're gonna manually do this. In order to use a matrix for operation to facilitate search, let's determine what the pivot element is in the initial simplex tableau. At that point, you can begin to perform the pivot operations that are the row operations. Somebody using move from one basic feasible solution to another.
What makes a pivot element? Like what makes it a pivot element?
So they're telling you in the box, it says selecting the pivot element, locate the most negative indicator in the bottom row of the tableau. The most negative. So that would be -40. The column containing this element is the pivot column. So the second column would be the pivot column, right? Divide each positive element in the pivot column above the line with the corresponding element in the last column. The pivot row is the row corresponding to the smallest quotient obtained. If the pivot column has no possible element, there's no solution. The pivot is the element in the intersection of the pivot column and pivot row. Note the pivot element is always positive, never on the bottom row. Okay, so scroll down a little bit. Let's see if we figure out how they did that. Oh, sorry, too far. I need to see that box. Yeah, performing a pivot. Pivot operation consists of performing row operations. So you're going to do this reduced row echelon thing that we talked about, multiplying the pivot row by the reciprocal of the pivot element to transform the pivot element to 1. Okay, so you're dividing it basically, but you're turning it into 1. You're turning the pivot element into 1. Remember how we do that a lot? Add multiples of the pivot row to the other rows in the tableau to transform all other non-zero elements in the pivot column. Okay, so we're doing that same process. So, but there's a certain order that they're wanting you to do it in. That's what you're determining the pivot column and the pivot row and the pivot element. So determine the pivot column, which is 2. Remember we talked about that?
Yeah.
So 90 divided by 1 is 90. So let's go back, scroll up to that second step. So we can see that. So why is it 90? Okay, so they're taking 90. So kind of hard because yeah, they're taking the value to the right. Divide each positive element in the pivot column above the line with the corresponding element in the last column. Okay, so we're dividing that. So do you see that? Hold on, go back up there. I got to read that again. It says, can you do me a favor? I know this is going to be a pain, but can you take all of these? Can you do screenshots and put them in so that I can write it up and kind of explain? Can you take screenshots of this?
Yeah, which parts
of this explanation? Just this whole explanation.
Yeah.
Maybe if you click print, we can just, if you click print, is there a PDF it'll give us so we can just look at a PDF?
I hope.
There we go. That's much better. Or now that you've done that, just take a screen. Oh, maybe I can do it. Hold on. Let me see if I can do it. Well, maybe, do you have an iPad or no? Oh, wait, I know the trick. Wait, there's a trick to take a screenshot. I use it's not working. I'm trying to use my Apple Pencil to take a screenshot.
I can just screenshot it in.
Yeah, maybe it's easier for you to do it. Here, I'm just gonna go to the Jamboard and keep adding some pages so you can just pop it in different pages. perfect. There you go. And you don't need to do anything but put them on there. I'll organize them.
All right, perfect.
But put them on, try to put them on different pages. See, I've got different pages set up.
Yeah.
That's all right. I can just duplicate these pages.
All right. Yeah, these things are the same. The ones on 4. All right. Do you want me to stop screen sharing?
No. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Did you put all the screens on there? All right, that's good. This will be much easier. How many screens were there total?
Like 3.
Okay. Page 9 is the last one.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I need this one.
Or no.
I think I have one extra that I don't need.
Yeah.
So is this where this is where we started?
8 is the middle one.
Solving the linear program using the simplex method. Determine. Oh, it looks like this is the same thing.
Number 10. Number 10 is a so we could probably delete.
Oh, this is the same. This is the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Page 8 is the middle one. And then you have something else on page 10. Okay, got it. All right, so those 3, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Let me delete this page. Okay. I think I can delete this page too. Okay, so this is the first page, right? So here's how we do the simplex method. So we understand how we create the matrix, right? So what they're saying is they're locating the most negative indicator on the bottom row. So the most negative indicator on the bottom row of the tableau is this one. And then it says the column containing this element is the pivot column. So the pivot column.
Yeah.
The pivot column is this column. Okay. And then it says divide each positive element of the pivot column by
okay.
Above the line into the pivot column into the corresponding element in the last column. So that's, let's see, divide each positive element in the pivot column above the line into the corresponding element in the last column.
So it'd be 90 divided by 1 equals 90. 63 divided by 1 is 60.
Right. Yeah, you're dividing. Yes, I believe that's what they're telling you to do. The pivot row is the row corresponding to the smallest quotient obtained. So the pivot row is the row corresponding to the smallest quotient obtained. So the pivot row is whatever is the smallest, which would be 1/90, because 1/90 is smaller than 2/108. You follow? So this is the pivot row. You understand that? That's the pivot row, because
wait, could you share your screen?
1/90 is smaller than 2/108, and which is smaller than 1/63. So that's the smallest. So that's the pivot row.
Yeah.
And then the pivot element is the intersection of those. So the pivot element, the pivot is the element of the intersection of those. So that's the pivot. The pivot is the element in the intersection of the pivot column and pivot row. Is always positive and is never in the bottom row. So that's the pivot element. So performing a pivot operation consists of performing row operations. You first multiply the pivot row. So remember, the pivot row is the blue row. So first multiply the pivot row by the reciprocal of the pivot element to transform the pivot element to 1.
Wait, pivot row. Pivot row
Pivot element is the pivot element is 1. So multiply the pivot row by the reciprocal of the pivot element to transform the pivot element into 1, which I believe this was already 1, so we didn't have to do it for this.
So the pivot row. The pivot, yeah.
And then add multiples of the pivot row to other rows in the tableau to transform all other non-zero elements in the pivot column into a 0. So you want to turn all of these into zeros. You want to turn all of those into zeros. So we're multiplying that by -1 first and adding it to turn this into a 0. So multiply all of these things by -1 and add it to this to turn that into a 0. So this would become a -1. This would become a -1 because I'm multiplying this by -1 and adding it here. This is still 1, this is still 0, this is still 0, and this is going to be a -27.
Because I divided it by what?
Yeah, because I did. It's basically doing that procedure. So see what they did here? We're on page 2. That's the smallest one. Determine the pivot column. Oh, shoot. Maybe I did that wrong. Oh, I did it wrong. I think I did the wrong thing for the pivot row. I think it was the opposite. I think it was the reciprocal. Divide each positive element into the corresponding element in the last row. Divide it into. Oh, so I did this wrong. It should have been, maybe I did that wrong. Hold on. It should have been, I think, 90 divided by 1, 63 divided by 1, and 108 divided by 2. And whichever one is the smallest quotient obtained, which would be, this would be 54. That's the smallest quotient. So the bottom one should be the pivot. That's my fault. I misinterpreted that. That's your pivot row. You understand? And 2 is your pivot element, I believe. Let's see if I did that right now.
So it's the pivot column, not the row.
There is a pivot column and a pivot row. The pivot row is row 3 because 54 is the smallest. 54 is smaller than 63 and 90. And so the pivot row is row 3. So I'm going to take row 3 and do that reduced row echelon thing to change the other rows. So multiply the pivot row, which is row 3, by the reciprocal of the pivot element, which was just 1, to transform it. Oh no, we hadn't done that yet. So I have to divide that by 2. So I had to convert this into a 1. Remember it was a 2 before? So I divided everything by 2. And now I'm going to add that to all the other rows, or subtract it, multiply it by -1 I want to make this a 0 and this a 0 and this a 0. So remember doing this before with matrices. So I'm going to multiply this by -1, all of these things by -1, and add it to this row to replace that second row. So basically I'm just subtracting this row from this one. So this would be negative 1/2 to subtract those, 0. This is still 0. This is still 1 because it doesn't matter. There's nothing here. Subtract negative. So this is -1/2. See what I'm doing? 54 or 63 minus 54 is 9. So there's
all the
my
basic
new
variables stay the same.
Are these the basic variables? Is that what you mean? You're just trying to make that into a 0. You're doing the reduced row echelon form is what you're doing. But you're just doing it in a specific order, choosing the pivot rows and the pivot columns and stuff like that. And then it says, so that's what I did. So that was my pivot element, and I changed everything else to 0. So let's go backward here. Look at the original. This was my pivot element 2, and my goal was to turn in all of these three numbers in that column into a 0 by first changing this to a 1, and then multiplying it by whatever I needed to in order to get this. So I had to multiply a 1 by a 40 to get rid of this into a -40 plus 40 is 0. So I'm converting that to a 0 by doing the reduced row echelon form operations. You follow what I'm saying?
Divided by what?
So this is the thing that we kind of cheat. We didn't really cheat, but we would just use our calculator to do it because it's so tedious. But this is what they're telling us to do with the simplex method. And I think there's probably a way to do it on your calculator, to be honest with you, but I don't know. They're not telling us in the book how to do that. But we're basically trying to turn this into reduced row echelon form, but kind of in a special way. So I'm kind of wondering if we can just use our calculator. Let's see if we can use our calculator. Let's see if we can do something with this, because what I'm basically trying to do now is eventually I'm trying to turn how did my pivot column, see how I want that pivot column to be 1. I want this to stay as a 1.
What do I have to do with that 2 that's highlighted in the yellow?
So what you have to do is you have to take this and divide it by 2. You have to divide everything in this blue row by 2, and that replaces the blue row. So 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. That was your goal. These are 0 still. This is 1/2 or 0.5, and this is 54. Okay, so that's this. See that row, how that row got changed? But now I'm going to change all of these elements here to 0. See how these all turn into zeros?
Yeah.
They turn into zeros by me doing that thing where I multiply this row by whatever number I need to, so that when I add it to this row, this becomes 0. So what do I have to multiply this by and add it to this to make this 0? It would be -1, right?
To make what row? The blue row?
Yeah, so this is my pivot row. I'm taking this row and I'm multiplying it by, so this is row, I'm multiplying it by -1. So row 3 times -1, and I'm adding it to, sorry, I'm changing this row. So I'm taking row 3, multiplying it by -1 and adding it to row 1 to give me my new row 1.
So do I divide the whole row by the whole third row?
This whole row, I'm not dividing it now. I already divided it by 2. I already made that into a 1. Now I'm taking this whole row and I'm multiplying it by -1. So what would that give me? it'd give me negative 0.5, negative 1, negative 0.5, and negative 54. But now I'm adding that to this top row. And that sum is replacing my top row. So what's 2 plus a negative 0.5? What's this plus this?
2.
What's 2 plus a negative 0.5?
2 plus negative 0.5. Point 1.5. 1.5.
See how that's a 1.5?
Yeah.
That's my new row. That's my new element in there. Got it?
So
What's negative 1 plus 0?
R
Sorry, what's negative 1 plus 1?
0.
That was my goal. I wanted to turn this into a 0. What's 0 plus 1?
0.
It's still 1.
Well,
No,
still
plus
1.
1. What's 0 plus 0?
0.
Still 0. What's negative 0.5 plus 0? Negative 0.5. What's 0 plus 0? 0. What's negative 54 plus 90? 36.
Yeah.
So there's my new row. There's my new row. My new row 1.
Wait, what'd you do with
is
that 90?
that row
Was
when
the
90 plus negative 54 is 36. Because that's what we're doing. That's the reduced row echelon stuff that we're doing. So now we're going to change row 2. What are we going to do to get our new row 2? Remember, what are we trying to do? We're trying to take whatever, we're trying to make this thing right here a 0.
So
that's our goal.
1.
How do we do it? We're going to multiply row 3 by negative 1, and we're going to add it to row 2, and that's going to be our new row 2. So what's our new row 2? Well, fortunately, I've already done this, right? It's negative, 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 negative. It's just those same numbers, right? But now we're going to add it. What's 1 plus a negative 0.5? Positive 0.5. What's negative 1 plus 1?
0.
0. That's my goal, right? What's 0 plus 0?
0.
0. What's 0 plus 1?
1.
1. What's 0 minus 0.5?
Minus 0.5.
Negative 0.5. What's 0 plus 0?
0.
0. What's 63 minus 54? 9. So there's my new row 2. It's that row right there. And then do the same thing with the bottom row. I want this to turn into a 0. How do I make that turn into a 0? By doing something. I have to do something with that pivot row, right? What was the pivot row? The pivot row was this bottom row here, right? I'm going to erase these real quick. What I do with this pivot row, I'm going to have to multiply it by what? To make this, I basically want that negative 40 to be a 0, but I do something to the pivot row and add it to that bottom row to make it into a 0. I'm going to have to multiply it by 40, right? You understand that? So it's row 3 times 40 plus the bottom row, or row 4, is going to give me my new row 4. So what's my new row 4? Well, let's multiply it by 40. 0.5 times 40 is 20. This is 40. This is still 0. This is still 0. This is 20. This is still 0. What's 40 times 54? 2160. You see what we're doing? So I multiplied all of those things by 40 so that now when I add them to here, what do I get? I want this to be what? 0. What's 40 plus negative 40? 0. What's 20 minus 30? Negative 10. This stays 0. This stays 0. This becomes 20. This stays 1. And this becomes 2160. So what have I done? I have taken the pivot element, which was this element right here, and I've used to change all of the other numbers in that column into 0 by doing these 3 different operations. Very tedious, right? Very tedious work, but that's what I did. Okay. Now, I don't know if there's a way to do that on your calculator, but maybe there's not. I don't know. I've not seen it. There probably is. I'm sure there is. It's just an algorithmic type thing that we're doing. I just don't know what it is on these calculators. But now we're not done yet, because now we have to find a next pivot element using that same process. What was the process? We take these numbers that are here and we divide into these numbers and see which one is the smallest. And that's our new pivot element. And we do that whole same process over again. Okay. So now what's our new pivot element? Look at my column here. I'm going with the negative most bottom row, which is this row. So here's my pivot, my pivot column. That's the first thing we did, pivot column. There's my pivot column. That's negative. And now my pivot row, I divide these into here. What's 36 divided by 1.5? I'm trying to find the smallest number. 36 divided by 1.5 versus, so you see they're doing that right here. That's 24. 9 divided by 0.5 is 18, and 54 divided by 0.5 is 106. So this is the smallest. So that's my new pivot. That's my new pivot element. My new pivot element is the, what was it, the second one? Yeah, it's the second column. So I'm taking this, see what I did? I turned it into a 1 by doing what? Dividing everything by 0.5. Dividing by 0.5 is the same as multiplying by 2. So I basically just doubled everything in this column, or in this row right here. So that's 0, 0, 0, 2, negative 1, 18. See that?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm taking those numbers, I'm taking what I found and changing all of these things to 0. Sorry, changing all of these things to 0. I know. I'm telling you, it's so freaking tedious.
I know.
And I just don't know if there's a way to do it on a calculator. There has to be. I just don't know. I just don't know it. I don't know if they've taught that to you or even how to do that. But this is the tediousness of this process that you have to do. So what did I do? I changed this. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take this, multiply it by negative 1.5 and add it to this row here. So that would turn this into a 0. 2 times negative 1.5 is negative 3. So add it to 0 and there's my negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 1.5 is positive 1.5. Plus 0.5 is 1. Well, that's nice. Still 0. Multiply that by 1.5, you get 27. I'm sorry, negative 27. 36 minus 27 is 9. So there's my next new row.
Mm-hmm.
You get it? What do I have to do to make this a 0? I multiply this by 0.5, negative 0.5 and add it below. So that would be a 0. That'd stay a 1. That would be a 0. Negative 0.5. So that's like dividing by 2, negative 2. So this becomes a negative 1. This is, this becomes a positive 0.5. So that adds to that and becomes a positive 1. This becomes a negative 9. So adds to that becomes a 45. And then you do the same thing with this bottom column. Multiply everything here by 10 and add it to here to make this a 0. So that becomes a 0. That becomes a 20. That becomes a 10 because negative 10 plus 20 is 10. That becomes a 1. Multiply that by 10. That's 180. 180 plus 2160 is that number.
All right. So from my question,
Now, hold on one second. Here's the key. It says, can the simplex method continue on the system? The answer is no. And I believe that's because we don't have any more negative numbers in the bottom row. But I don't know that for sure because I don't know what, yeah, here we go. Stopping the simplex method. If it is not possible to select the pivot column, the simplex method stops and the optimal solution has been found. If the pivot column has been selected and it is not possible to select the pivot row, I don't know why it would be not possible to select a pivot row. Maybe you can't divide by 0 or something. I'm not sure. The simplex method stops and there is no optimal solution. So if it is not possible, well, how do I select the pivot column? Now we got to go back to that. Selecting a pivot column. Locate the most negative indicator on the bottom row. So maybe if there's no negative, maybe if there's no more negative ones, maybe that's the, I don't know, that it's a little bit ambiguous there, but maybe because there's no more negative values, maybe that's why you're done.
Yeah.
See how all the negative values are gone? So maybe that's all you have to do. Okay.
Huh.
That makes sense.
I mean,
so should we try this one?
Let's try out on the one from the homework though.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's try it on the homework. So what was our, let's go back to our matrix. Whoops. Let's just see what the matrix looks like. There's our matrix. Okay. Is that right? Okay. So it's 2, 2, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 60. 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 42.
Yeah.
1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 0, 72. And negative 30, negative 40. Are those in the right place? I think they are. 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think they put a line here. The first pivot column is going to be this one. And so let's divide 60 divided by 1 versus 42 divided by 1 versus 72 divided by 2. 72 divided by 2 is 36. So this is our pivot element right here.
What is?
Make sense? Because that's the smallest number. You take the smallest number, 36 was the smallest.
Yeah.
Make sense? That's how we find the pivot element. So this is our pivot row. That's our pivot element. So the first thing to do is to convert that all into, divide everything by 2. Because we're gonna convert this into a 1. So we divide that whole row by 2, and we get 0.5 or 1/2, 1, 0, 0, 0.5, 0, 36. Make sense how I came up with that? You follow how I did that? Yes, Nick?
So
what was my objective? It was to turn this into a 1 by dividing everything by 2. So that's my new equation. That's my new third equation, third row.
0.5, 0.
Okay.
All right. And then, okay, so that's the first part. And that's just dividing that whole row by the pivot element, which is 2.
Yep. Because I was just turning that into a 1.
Okay.
Now I'm going to multiply that row, this new row, I'm going to multiply that by whatever I need to to turn these things into 0, but I'm doing it one at a time. Okay. I'm going to erase this to give me some space. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that new row is row 3 divided by or times 1/2 divided by 2 or times 1/2 gives me my new row 3. Got it?
Give me
Follow?
Give me 1 second. So
now to find my new row 1, I'm gonna take my row 3 and I'm multiplying it by -1 and adding it to my original row 1, and that's going to give me my new row 3 or row 1. So I'm taking this row and multiplying it by -1 and adding it to the first row, because remember, what's my goal? I want to turn this into a what? I want to turn that into a 0. So how do I turn that into a 0? Well, now that this is a 1, I'm just going to multiply this row by -1 because that, and then add it to this because that'll turn that into a 0.
wait.
You follow?
Yeah, give me 1 second to write this down. Row 3 -1. I'm like writing it down as bullet points. Like,
got it. And remember, you can go back because this is on YouTube. I'm streaming this whole thing, so you can just go back and pause it.
So after row
so maybe
3,
don't.
After row 3, times -1 plus R1, you get row 3 times
That gives
1.
me my new row 1. This is my new row 1, which is going to be written in yellow up here. So my new row 1 is formed by multiplying.
Where does the R3? Where does the R3 times 1/2?
That gave me my new row 2. So the first step was to take this and turn that into a 1. That was step 1. And I did that by just dividing everything here by 2. Dividing that by 2, dividing that by 2, those don't matter. Dividing that by 2, dividing that by 2.
And that was the second step. That was the second step after identifying 2 was after dividing row 3.
Yep. The second step is to turn that pivot. They're calling that the pivot element. Turn the pivot element into a 1. That was the step. Once you determine your pivot element, turn it into a 1 by dividing everything in that equation by that number.
So did you write the R3 before you, or R3 times -1? Did you write that before the R3 times 1/2?
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to save a little space because it literally could take like it would be so much writing for me to write it slower than that. But the first step was to turn this into the red equation, or this red line.
R3 times 1/2.
This is this R3. Yeah, let's call this my new R3. R3 asterisk. That's my new R3. So here's R3 asterisk. This is R3 asterisk right here. That's my new R3. Got it? This was my original R3. This is R3 asterisk right here. So I'm taking R3 asterisk, which is this row right here, and I'm multiplying that by -1, and I'm adding that to my original R1. This is my original R1, and it's giving me my R1 asterisk, my new R1. So my new R1 is going to be 1.5, 0, 1, 0, -0.5, 0, and let's see, -36 for 24. So do you see how I did that? I took all of these things, I multiplied them by -1 in my head and added them to all of these numbers.
Where does the 1/2
So
go?
this 1/2, that
Yeah.
didn't, this came from here. So I multiplied all of these by -1. What's a negative? So just make all these negative, right? And then add it to these elements. What's 2 plus a -1/2 or -0.5? What's 2 plus -0.5?
How'd you get
Positive
-0.5?
1.5. Because I'm multiplying. Remember what I'm doing? I'm multiplying this whole row. Here's my instructions. It's like a computer program. I'm going to take this row, R3 asterisk, multiply it by a -1, and add it to R1 to get my new R1 elements. So I'm doing 7 different operations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And here are the 7 different operations. I'm multiplying this by -1 and adding it to the element here. So what's 2 plus -1/2? Positive 1.5.
Okay.
What's -1, right? What's 1 times -1 plus 1?
0.
It's
Or
0. And that's the reason, by the way, that I chose that little algorithm, because I wanted this to be a what?
one.
I wanted
0.
that to be a 0. That's what that reduced row echelon procedure is, or the whatever they call. I can't even remember what it's called. There's like a different name for what the process is called. It's been so long I haven't done it. Gauss-Jordan. I think it's the Gauss-Jordan elimination.
So you're
method.
getting the new
something.
row 1 before you do. I'm so confused on what this R3 times 1/2 is.
Well, R3 times 1/2 was that first step. That's done. I've already moved on. R3 times 1/2 is just my new, that was the simple first process. That's my new row 2 or row 3.
But I thought we were dividing
My new,
by 2.
I did. What time multiplying by 1/2 is the same as dividing by 2.
Oh, okay.
So I just took all of this and I divided by 2, or I multiplied by 1/2. That's
Okay,
the same
okay.
thing. Got it?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take, again, I'm taking this element, multiplying it by -1 and adding it to this element. So that's going to give me 0 plus 1, which is still 1. 0 plus 0, which is 0. -0.5 plus 0, which is -0.5. 0 plus 0, which is 0. Now this one's the tricky one. -36, right? -36 plus 60, which is 24. So that's my new row 1.
And then after
Now we got to do the same thing for row 2. What's my new row 2 going to be? It's going to be my original. It's going to be my original, or my new row 3 times. Well, remember, what do I want to do? I want to turn this element into a what?
0.
I want to turn that into a 0. And how do I turn that into a 0? By multiplying. Look at what I have here.
Yeah.
Multiplying that number by -1 and adding it to 1 will give me a 0. So I'm going to multiply it by -1, and I'm going to add that to my row 2, my original row 2, and that's going to give me my new row 2. My row 2 asterisk.
Let me try this. Let me try this part on my own.
Okay.
So R3 minus, wait, so it'd be 0.5.
Good. 0.5
times -1 plus
plus
1,
which is
0.5.
good. What's the next element?
1 times -1 point, or plus 1, 0.
It better be 0, right?
Right, because that's what
That
we're
was our
trying.
goal. Yep. What's the next one?
0, -1 plus 0, 0 again.
Good. What's the next one?
Wouldn't that just be 0 again?
No, careful, because you still have, you're adding one here. It's 0 plus 1, so it's 1. It's 0 times -1, which is 0, plus
And then
1.
0.5 -1 times -1 plus 0.
Do it. Take your time. Negative 0.5, or sorry, 0.5 times what?
-1.
Which is
-0.5.
good. Plus what? Negative 0.5 plus
Point 0 plus 0.
0 is
Negative
what?
0.5.
There you go. Negative 0.5. How about this last one? 0 plus
0 times -1 equals 0 plus 0. So that would be
good. How about the last thing? Good. How about this?
Let me do this one. 36 -1 plus 42 6.
Nice. There's your next row. There's your row. There's your row 2, your new row 2. How about your bottom row? What's your bottom row going to be? Now, this is the hardest one, but not impossible. You just have to take your time. Do it step by step. What's our bottom row going to be? I'm going to take row 3. I'm going to take the new row 3 and multiply. Remember, what's my goal? I want to turn this into a what?
0.
That's right. So how do I turn that into a 0? I multiply
By -40.
not a negative 40, because that's already a
Just a
negative 40.
positive
How about
40?
by a positive 40? Yep. And then I add it to that row 4 to give me my new row 4.
All right,
Make
so
sense?
it would be 0.5.
What's that? Which is half, right? 0.5 is just half. So it's
Yes,
half
and
of
then
40.
40 plus -30.
Mm-hmm. Which is what?
-10.
Good. Then what?
Be 0 because that's what we're trying to get.
Good. Good. Then what?
Um,
Don't think too hard. Just 0 again. Then what?
40 plus whatever that
Don't
was.
think too hard. Just 0
0
again.
again.
Then what? What's half of 40?
20.
Half of 40 is 20. And I'm adding it to what? 0, which is what?
20.
20.
And then
0 times that just turns into what?
0.
No, it'd be a 1.
Okay.
You still have a 1, right? Because there's still a 1 here.
Yeah.
Follow? Okay, and what's the last one going to be? This is the bigger number. What did I do? I did 36 times 40, right?
Yeah.
So 36 times 40 is 1440. And I'm adding it to 0. So what do I get?
1440.
Yep. All right, good. We did it. We pivoted.
Holy
Why did we do
shit.
that? Because we wanted this column to be what? 1, 0, 0, 0.
Oh, 0.
Now, am I done pivoting?
No.
No. Now I have to do that whole process again, but this time with what? Well, find our pivot column.
-10.
What's our pivot? Pivot column is this column. What's our pivot element?
10.
Now you're going to divide these by these, each of these by these, each of these by these, and whichever one is the smallest, that's your pivot row, and that determines your pivot element, and do the whole freaking thing over again.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
No way.
So what's our new pivot? Let's see what our new pivot, let's determine our new one. It's 24 divided by 1.5, or 6 divided by 0.5, or 36 divided by 0.5. This is dividing by a half is like multiplying by 2. So this is 72. This is 12. This is dividing by 3 halves is like multiplying by 2 and dividing by 3. So that's 8 times 2, 16. So this is 16. So our pivot row is that row. Got it?
Because it's the smallest.
Because it's the smallest number. It's the smallest number.
Wait, let me do that. Let me copy that down. 24, 1.5 equals 16.
So that means we're going to start with our pivot. We're going to try to take this column right here, or this row, I'm sorry, this row, and we're going to change this to a 1, and everything else changes accordingly. How do I change this to a 1? Row 2, how do I change this element to a 1? I divide it by itself, right? So it's row 2 divided by 0.5. Dividing by 0.5 is the same as multiplying by what?
1/2.
Times 2. Dividing by a half is the same as multiplying by 2. Follow that?
So I multiply it by 2.
So multiply everything by 2. What are you going to get? You're going to get 1, 0, 0, 2, -1, 0, 12. See how I did that? So that's my new row 2. That's row 2 asterisk times 2 is going to give me row 2. I'm going to call it row 2 underline instead of row 2 asterisk, or row 2. It's row 2 underline. Got it? My new row 2. Follow? And now guess what I get to do? Guess what I have the joy of doing? I have the joy of pivoting with that column and rearranging all of the other elements as well. How do I do that? Same old process. I'm going to multiply that. I take that. So my new row 2 times, look at what I'm trying to do here. Trying to turn that into a what? I'm trying to turn that into a 0. I'll do this in blue so you can see my color change. I'm trying to turn this into a 0 now. How do I turn that into a 0? I multiply this new row 2, this thing, by a what? And adding it to this. What do I have to do? I've got to multiply it by -1.5, right? -1.5, and then add it to my old row 1, which was my row 1
asterisk. That's the new R2 you're doing that with?
Yep, it's all, yep, because that's why my first step was to turn this into a 1. So you get a little better at this, by the way, the more you do it. So this is obviously going to be a 0, because -1.5, right? That's going to be a 0. This is still going to be a 0, right? Because it doesn't matter if I multiply 0 by anything. So that's still a 0. This is still a 1. You understand? So because I'm just multiplying this by -1.5. That doesn't change. 2 times -1.5 is -3. And adding -3 to 0 gives me a what? -3. -1 times -1.5 is a +1.5. And adding a positive 1.5 to a negative 0.5 gives me a what? A 1. How convenient. That's a nice number to have in these things. Multiplying 0 times a negative 1.5 is going to give me 0 still, and adding it to 0 is still going to give me a 0. And then here's the tricky one. 12 times negative 1.5 is negative 18 plus 24. What's negative 18 plus 24?
8.
6.
Oh.
It's 6. Got it? Really not, to be honest with you, it's really not that tricky once you do it a few times.
Yeah.
All right, let's do the next one. You got it? So now I want to turn this into a what?
You want to turn it into a 1 or 0?
Into a 0. I want to turn that into a 0. How do I turn that into a 0? I multiply my new R2 by a negative 0.5, and I add it to my old R3, and that gives me my new R3. You understand that? So again, go through that process. That times a negative 0.5 plus that, 0. Got it? That times a negative 0.5, which is 0, plus that, still 1. That times a negative 0.5, still 0, plus 0, still 0. That times a negative 0.5, remember, times a negative 0.5 is like dividing by negative 2. So that'll give me a negative 1 plus 0 is a negative 1. Follow?
Kind of. And then, so
that times a negative 0.5 is a positive 0.5 plus that. What's 0.5 plus 0.5?
1.
It's 1. How convenient. I got a 1 back. It's really nice to get. That times a negative 0.5, still 0, plus 0, still 0. All right, here's the trickiest one. That times a negative 0.5.
Let me try this one. Let me try this
times
one.
a negative. Okay.
So it'd be 12 times negative 0.5 plus
What's 12 times negative 0.5?
negative 6.
Good. Plus,
36.
which is
30.
perfect. You got it. All right. Now for the important row. What am I going to do to modify this bottom row? What's my goal? What do I want to turn that into?
Uh, 1 or 0.
A 0. And how do I turn that into a 0? I take
Multiply
my
it by
new
10.
R2, multiply it by 10, and add it to my old R4. And that is going to give me my new R4, which is 0. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Multiply this. Remember, I'm doing this black row, right? This is my pivot. This is my pivot row. Keep track of that. That's my pivot row. Okay. 0 times 10 is 0, plus 0 is 0. Right? 0 times 10 plus 0 is
0.
0. Right? 2 times 10 plus
20.
0 is
20.
20. Negative 1 times 10 is negative 10, plus 20 is
10.
10. I'm waiting for you to answer. 0 times 10 is what?
0.
Plus 1 is
1.
1. And now here's the tricky one, the big one. 12
would it be
times 10?
12 times 10 plus 1440? 1560.
Yep. There you go. And there is our answer. Because now we can't do any more. There's no more pivot elements possible because we have no more negative, I believe. We have no more negative values in the bottom. And here's the key. You see that? That's our number 1 right there.
So the maximum value of P is 1560.
I believe the maximum value is 1560. And it's when, let's see. Let me see how they solve this now. So now you see what your slack 2 and your slack 3 are, and you plug them back in to solve for your, oh, well, no, there they are right there. 1, 1, 18, and 45. It's the max value is when X sub 1 is 18 and X sub 2 is 45. There's your answers. So it's when
18.
X1 is 12. That was in our example. X1 is 12, X2 is 30, and the profit max is 1560. And that's how you do the simplex method manually. Now, is there a way
How'd
to
you get
do it
X1 to equal 12?
Because remember what this row represents, or this column represents? This is our X1. There's 1X1, 1X1, X1 is 12. See that row? X2, remember this is our X2. Remember this was our X1, this was our X2, this is our slack 1, slack 2, slack 3, our P. So that's our X1, that's our X2, that's our profit, and it's when slack variable 2 equaled 20 and slack variable 3 equaled 10.
So what makes X1 12?
The fact that you've got this simplex method in simplest form, that's how it makes it 12. They don't care about your slack variables. They just want to know what your X1 and your X2 variables are. They're not, at least, so it seems that way to me. They don't care about your slack variables. Okay.
So and X1 is 12 because that's where the 1 is.
Yeah, remember this whole process, it was like, remember how when we did these things before? Remember how when we did these things before, you would get like your matrix would look like this: 1, 0, 0, 1, and 5, 6.
So what if the X2?
You remember? And then you'd say X1 equals 5 and X2 equals 6. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's your X1, that's your X2. So X1, 1X1, if you were to write this out, you would write 1X1 plus 0X2 equals 5. Well, that just means X1 equals 5. And that second equation would have been 0X1 plus 1X2 equals 6.
So because there's that
equation.
Because there's a 1.
Because there's a 1 in the column and zeros everywhere else. That means that X1 equals 12. Now it happens to be when your slack variable 2 or your second slack variable equals 2 and your third equals -1, but that they're not asking for that information. They just want to know what's your maximum profit and at what X1 and X2 variables are there. They're not concerned about the slack variables because there's all kinds of solutions to this equation.
Okay.
There's an infinite number of solutions because you could change the slack variables all you want. But when you're trying to find the max or the min, whatever this particular instance is, then that tells you how to do that for optimizing the profit equation.
Okay.
I can't get too much into the background of why, because to be honest with you, I don't totally remember. And I don't think that they necessarily want you to remember either, but this is just the process, the simplex method for optimizing a linear programming problem using Slack variables and stuff like that. I don't really teach this, and I haven't really done this in a long time. So I just kind of was following along with the example. So I may be saying some things a little bit wrong, but that's the process. Is that answer right? Do you know?
It doesn't tell me,
Okay.
but I'm assuming that it is
All right.
right.
So, sound good?
Yeah. So Slack variables, and then
Now this video, I'm gonna go ahead and stop it now, but you can watch this.